All right, so I took a brief break from making videos because I really wanted to focus on moving my craft. I really wanted to focus on some artistic things, primarily just getting to the point where I'm fully committed to painting larger on location, which means nothing less than 16 by 20s. So I'm fully committed. I'm out of, like, I don't have any smaller panels, and that's kind of what it took, was going through those smaller panels, because oftentimes I would just chicken out and I would, think, oh, I'll just do a couple, 11 by 14s today. And then I'd get a good painting out of it and regret that it wasn't on a larger panel. So I am fully committed now and have been painting for pretty much a month now, just larger paintings on location. And that's going really well, and I'm finding that it's actually not harder, and in a lot of ways there are certain things that are easier about it. And it doesn't really take me any longer to do them, and I find it a lot more enjoyable. So that's number one. Another thing that I was trying to focus on when I was out painting on location was I'd get home, and oftentimes my shadows, like say on a cliff or whatever, would be really dark. And yet when I'm on location, I could look into the shadows, say the side of a cliff or a rock, the shadow side of a rock, and there was a lot of color and light in there. So what I've been doing is trying to, in fact, recently one thing I did, I went out to Pescadero, and my goal was to try to make the shadows as light as possible and still have it read as a shadow. And I was surprised at how light I could make the shadow and still have it read as in shadow. Another thing is kind of looking back at the history of outdoor painting, as I've talked about in previous videos, kind of digging deeper into that. If you look back at like photographs of outdoor painters, early outdoor painters, like say late 1800s, early 1900s, or paintings of outdoor painters, typically those paintings are large. I'd say like 18 by 24, 16 by 20, somewhere in that range seems to be the most common size. The current plein air movement tends to be people painting 8 by 10s, 9 by 12s, kind of small paintings, and then the occasional larger painting. Another thing that I've found about the origins of the outdoor painters was they were avant-garde. The painters that were out there were trying to push painting, and they were seen as cutting edge or avant-garde. That is not the case with the current plein air movement. There doesn't seem to be a lot of sort of pushing the boundaries or exploration or whatever. It doesn't seem, which is fine, but it just doesn't seem like an outdoor painting, for the most part, doesn't seem to be drawing painters who are avant-garde painters. It tends to be drawing painters who are trying to paint the past or paint like painters from the past. And I'm interested in outdoor painting and outdoor painters that are pushing the boundaries and trying to move on and grow. Like I said, I've been kind of looking into the history, kind of look more into Monet's paintings. There's some videos you can watch on YouTube where they will scroll like 1,500 Monet paintings with some background music. I've been watching those. I turned down the background music because it's not that great, but it's okay. But what I'll do is I will open another tab and with another YouTube video, and I'll play like Chopin or Debussy. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but sort of music from the era of, the Impressionists or whatever. Great music as well, and it accompanies the paintings really well. So, but looking at Monet, I have a newfound respect for his, there's so many paintings that I hadn't seen that are really amazing. So yeah, really a big fan of what he was doing. And then also too, there's a ton of paintings on there that just flat out don't work. You can see he's exploring or experimenting, and there's a wide variety that he paints too. So you can see that his motivation was exploration and growth and trying to, he'd go out and paint the same subject repeatedly with different atmospheric effects. I really sort of identify with that. That sort of really resonates with me. That's something that I like to do. It is fun to go out to the same spot on a different day and try to capture the atmospheric effect of that day. So that's something I'm going to be doing more of in the future. Anyway, so newfound respect for him. And notice a couple things interesting that I might want to mention too about his compositions. One is Monet would often put his horizons dead center in the canvas. And if you know anything about composition, that's like one rule, is don't put anything right in the middle. It's not overly obvious when you're looking at the paintings. You kind of have to look because it doesn't jump out at you as a problem. But it is interesting how many paintings of his, the horizon is just dead center or close to it. Another thing I noticed that he does that I don't do is he includes a tremendous amount of sky in his paintings. Usually I'll crop a painting or compose a painting where I cut the sky off right above, like say a tree or a cliff. I leave just a little bit of sky. And he tends to leave a tremendous amount of sky, which I noticed creates a different feel. There is more of this airy, open feeling, more of a feeling of space. It's interesting how that has a different psychological effect. I even experimented by taking one of his paintings, putting it on my computer and cropping it down, and cropping it the way I would typically crop, where I'm looking for an interesting pattern of shapes. And I would often crop, like I say, crop the sky out because it can be just this big, uninteresting open space. But I'm reconsidering that because that openness creates a feel. So when I cropped down his paintings, it did feel claustrophobic slightly, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So that's something that I'm going to be experimenting with in the future too, is leaving more sky. So anyway, but then I went to the library and I got out a book called Monet by Himself, which is primarily his letters to people throughout his life. And I would recommend the book, although there's a lot of repetitive things going on in the letters. Most of the letters, I'd say the majority of them are to his wife, Alice. He would often go away for long periods of time on painting trips, like say, I think as much as 4 or 5, 6 months sometimes, and leave her with the kids, but he would write to her. Also, he would write to his dealer and his friend, Frederick Brazil, and ask for money. He was constantly in financial trouble, it seemed like, until about the age of 50, where things turned around, and then eventually he became really wealthy. But I think there was a period of time there, especially in the early days, where he was constantly asking for money, and he could be really kind of a bully about it. He had kind of an entitled attitude. I think he had a mission and he knew he needed to be supported. He did believe in what he was doing. He believed in the work, but he was running out of money, and oftentimes it caused him great distress, especially after his family cut him off of all money at about the age of 30. So from the age of 30 to 50, it was kind of difficult times, but he kept at it. Anyway, and then, so I have a few things here I'll mention that there may be of interest to some of those people out there who want to nerd out on this, like I did. One is somebody asked him about his colors, what colors he used, and it was interesting because in one letter he said, I don't know why, this is really not that interesting. His idea was you could get the effects that he gets or even better with a different palette. It's just what he was in the habit of using. But anyway, he used flake white, not really available anymore, cadmium yellow, vermilion, which is a type of red that's kind of now been replaced by cadmium red light, typically, madder deep, which was like a purplish red that's been replaced by alizarin crimson, and then cobalt blue and emerald green, and he said, and that's it. That's all he used. Now that was when he was 65 years old, so I'm sure he went through various different palettes, and like he said, it doesn't really matter, but I did find that interesting and thought some of you might find it interesting as well. Let's see, what else? One other thing I found interesting was he would take out multiple canvases, large canvases, in a cart, and he would paint on them, like say for 10 minutes, and then when the light changed, he would pull out another one. So he had a series of paintings that he was working on of the same motif, but at different times, and he would only work on them for short periods of time while the light was appropriate for that particular canvas, if that's not too confusing. That seems like a lot of work. But he was pretty serious about capturing an accurate sort of representation of whatever the atmosphere of a certain time of day was. Anyway, I would recommend the book. It is, like I said, there's a lot of repetition in there, and you may find some other interesting things, especially like him communicating with other artists like Whistler, and there were a few others in there, Rodin, the sculptor. So it was kind of interesting seeing who his connections were and who he communicated with. Anyhow, that's kind of been it. As you can see, not super interesting. I am going to go out today and paint, so maybe I'll do a video of that. I'm thinking of going out to Pacifica and painting some rocks in glare on the water. I was looking through some of my photos and I saw this painting and I thought, oh, that's really great. I should do that again. I wonder what time of year that was, and it turns out it was exactly this time of year, so good timing. So I'm gonna head out and do that. Anyway, thanks for hanging out, guys. I will see you in the next video.